click. But the sights I saw while walking out, they nearly made me sick. I must admit I saw some girls, attractive little dears, arm in arm with ugly men with cauliflower ears. So if women like them, like men like those, why don't women like me?
I would go out tonight, but I haven't got a stitch to wear. This man said it's gruesome that someone so handsome should care. Na, 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 na. This charming man. Na, 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 na. A drummed-up country boy who never knew his place. He said, return to me. He knows so much about these things. He knows so much about these things. He knows so much about these things.
When I first heard the Smiths demo tape, well, I had that kind of feeling, you know. You couldn't immediately say, oh, well, of course, they've been listening to the Velvet Underground or the Doors or somebody like that. It did seem to be something which had just arrived, which is one of the wonderful things that happens in pop music, you know, is the fact that things suddenly spring full-armoured from the ground, probably another misquote, but, I mean, you know what I mean, and appear to have not been influenced by anything that's preceded them.
They've given rock music an Englishness that no other group has, not even the Beatles. Because the Beatles were singing in American accents, by and large. And one could say, yes, you know, they did all this and they brought in this Liverpudlian accent, and the Rolling Stones tried this Cockney thing, the Sex Pistols tried this, you know. I think the Smiths are the first group to have perfectly integrated this form to a point where they are the first real, you know, the first great pop group. The first great English pop group, the first original pop group. I mean, that's going to get, you know, really, I'm really putting myself on the line there. But I think at the end of the day, in 10 years' time, when I stake what remains of my critical reputation on this, but in 10 years' time, the Smiths will be viewed in the same way that the Beatles are now viewed.
I feel the Smiths create their world. And not many groups do that. In much the same way, if you like, as people like George Formby created their world. And the Smiths create their own environment. And you can either go in, or you can say, no, I want Diana Ross instead. And it's your choice, really. The Smiths came together quite by accident, really. It just suddenly happened, which sounds almost unbelievable, but it really did. It really did happen in a very sudden, very casual way. The meetings between the group members was very, very accidental, almost. And it was also at a very barren time in 1982 when everybody seemed to be lost and the vile elements were taking over and everything was, music was just horrendous, and it was very synthetic and it was very fake, and it was, the pop star was back, and the regimented pop star was back. And the punk ideals, for the first time, seemed to be totally dead, really.
I think it just needed some kind of kick in the face, the music scene at the time, because I think there's like the Human League, you know, Orchestral Manoeuvres, a lot of groups like that were just churning it out. I mean, it was like, okay, yeah, that's okay, but there was nothing that was, with sort of like intense, no kind of intensity.
We've got all these synthesizer duos and all kind of, with mixing metaphor, really corny as hell metaphorical lyrics with 18-syllable names. I mean, so we just went, and because we understood all that totally, and because, as I say, I've been involved in it to an extent and observed it in London, we just turned the whole thing around, and we called ourselves the Smiths, and then Morrissey took it into his own sphere totally, on top of the pops with National Health glasses, flowers out of the back of his trousers, and standing up for the Gork.
Because the years previous to the Smiths were quite dank for me, I could see this as my absolutely, perhaps sole key opportunity to do something constructive and to do something worthwhile. So therefore, when the time came to actually mount the stage, it was almost as if this strange forceful character completely took over and just... I actually stayed in the wings almost. And it was... Ultimately, I feel that that was really the natural me. Because most people feel that when you go onto a stage, you act or you develop some kind of character. But I tend to do that when I'm off stage. And when I'm on stage, I can relax and just be the normal me. Whatever that may be, the abnormal me, perhaps.
So what difference does it make? Oh, what difference does it make? Oh, it makes none. But now you have gone, and your prejudice won't keep you on tonight. Oh, the devil will find work for idle hands to do. I stole and then I lied just because you asked me to. But now you know the truth about me, you won't see me anymore. Well, I'm still fond of you. Oh. But no more apologies. No more apologies. Oh, I'm too tired. I'm so sick and tired. And I'm feeling very sick and ill today. But I'm still fond of you. Oh.
I mean, on the face of it, we wanted to ditch everything that people superficially think is rock and roll. Leather trousers and long hair and drugs. But the most important thing of aspects of the rock and roll, i.e. the gang mentality, with something exclusive to say, and arrogance, was our forte and still is.
A sort of video. I took one look at Morrissey. I was sitting at the tea table at the time, and I couldn't believe it. This emaciated man hurling flowers about the place with this fantastic, you know, pale features and chiselled jawline, you know. I thought, he's for me.
It's like sometimes if something's happened and you can go up to your bedroom, put the Smiths on, and you think, oh, well, thank God I've got Morrissey. Morrissey's still with me. He's like still saying them words to me. He's still there. And like even whatever happens, no matter what you're being through, Morrissey's always there to comfort you. He's always there to come out your speakers and sing to you.
I wouldn't want to characterise a typical Smiths fan, but you could say that there were certain things that they would be interested in, like being different, like perhaps being rather more solitary. And those are perfectly honourable, worthwhile things.
Well, male, as you say, late teens, lonely, dejected, failed in love, you know, very nervous, no confidence whatsoever. A box bedroom rebel. That's basically it, the stereotype. And that's not me. I don't think I'm a boy anyway.
In a live capacity, the audience seems to be predominantly male. And it seems it can be a very celebratory event, almost violent, very, very wild, which I'm quite happy about, because I think people don't really have many opportunities in life to let themselves go slightly and express themselves and step out of themselves and so on and be a little insane.
There is a light that never goes out. Yeah, I mean, this is a song. I mean, and every night I saw them play live. People were singing along to this song. They would go completely haywire. I mean, and the actual lyrics are a kind of, you know, a invitation to a sort of a, double suicide.
Morrissey has this very strange sense of humour, not a morbid sense of humour, but it's so straight, and he can say things so seriously And yet maybe behind it all, it's quite the opposite. And I think a lot of people totally misinterpret, totally, whatever he says and things he does. People, they choose to see, yes, the Smiths as being very morbid and maudling and, you know, very northern and gloomy. And yet they're not. I mean, lots of Johnny's guitar playing is really jubilant and very celebratory. It's really beautiful. Lots of their music, when I hear it, it's really uplifting.
I mean, on more than one occasion, I've actually laughed out loud at Smith's lyrics, and I don't often do that. I don't often laugh out loud at anything much. And I think that they're very funny lyrics, and I cannot understand why people assume that what they do is essentially miserable. I suppose because there are a lot of references to kind of death and pain and so forth in the lyrics, but again, it's done in the same sort of way as like books like The Loved One, you know, where it's sort of ironic, really. And I don't see them as being miserable at all. I get rather cross when people tell me they are.
I dreaded sunny days, so I'll meet you at the cemetery gates. Keats and Yeats are on your side.
Morrissey and I quite often, he'd just telephone and he'd say, oh, let's meet somewhere. We used to go walking on fine, sunny afternoons to Southern Cemetery in Manchester.
So we go inside and we gravely read the stones. All those people, all those lives, where are they now? Oh, with love and hate and passions just like mine. They were born and then they lived and then they died. Seems so unfair, I want to cry.
It was very peaceful and beautiful, but it wasn't done in any sort of morbid sense. Talking about it now seems quite strange, but at the time it seemed very natural. Or we'd go wandering in Moss Side and just, hours and days wandering, just the two of us, you know, together but very alone at the same time. It's like extremely intimate, but then extremely sort of very separate. We were always quite separate at the same time.
The death of a disco dancer. Well, it happens a lot round here. And if you think peace is a common goal, that goes to show how little you know.
Well, we did, quite often go out. We said, let's, go out tonight. And there'd be all these sort of hairdressers in wonderful clothes, and they all look so happy, and they'd be dancing, drinking. Morris and I just sort of sat there like we're at a funeral.
I never talk to my neighbour, I'd rather not get involved.
I mean, we would follow people around, sort of like little lambs, sort of looking at them saying, oh, aren't they beautiful? And like we were looking through a window at somebody. He'd say, do you think they're really happy? And I'd say, well, I think so. I hope so. And he'd say, well, can we ever be like that? Could I ever be like that? And of course not. No, he can never be happy. I don't think. I pray to God that one day he's happy, but, it's taking a long time coming.
I've never heard him say, I love you ever in a song, or I don't like you. He never has said anything positive. It's kind of, he hides behind other people's experiences all the time. But I think that's what he's trying to say about himself each time.
How do I write those songs? I write them in a very natural way, but in a very detached way also. But not to say that I simply sit down and guess. But it is very detached, which I think is also important, because not everybody has fantastically, endlessly romping private lives, as we know.
There is a sort of ambiguity. I mean, you're never quite sure who he's singing to or who he's singing about. I mean, the genders are all very, I think it's wonderful, just wonderfully vague. So therefore, whoever you are, whichever sex, I mean, you can almost listen to the songs and you can interpret them, to fit your life, give them, your meanings.
There's some very disturbing things going on in those lyrics. But from what I've gathered, I mean, Morrissey is very, very touchy about the whole male-female gender thing. He seems to think of a view of things as there is a third sex, which, you know, that appears to be his belief. And it certainly works. It really works. I think, you know, things like Handsome Devil, which is a you know, I mean, if the Rolling Stones had done that song, they would have never gotten away with a song like that. Never. I mean, if they'd have done that. Because it's, you know, I mean, it's basic homoerotic imagery.
A boy in the bush, work two in the hand. I think I can help you get through your exam. Oh, you handsome devil. Oh, let me get my hands on your mammary glands and let me get your head in the conjugal bed.
I wouldn't say that I sing from a staunchly male point of view. I think I have enough scope to really imagine how practically almost anybody would feel. And for me to sing in an exclusively male point of view is just very standard, really.
One doesn't have a particular sex when you sing. I mean, you've had so many lifetimes being a man or a woman or indifferent. I mean, so you can sing about all of those. But I would do it in the first person.
We used to read obsessively. I mean, you know, devouring book after book after book. I mean, it's a really essential ingredient in our lives. And most of the books we read were by women or about women, or somehow, you know, a woman sort of popped up somewhere.
People like Sheila Delaney, I was very, and remain so, very obsessed by. Oscar Wilde, a lot of feminist writers I was very interested in, because they, once again, they seem to really... they seem to have the key on very modern situations as far as relationships were concerned. They seem to be... feminism, although one can talk about feminism and people can screw up their brow and say, and back off, I think really they had the key to many things which have unravelled themselves within recent years as very strong political topics. Not just feminism, but broader issues.
Now, don't keep me waiting. I want a drink.
You've had enough.
Look, I'm not hanging about in this filthy hole.
Wait, where you like, then?
Certainly Sheila Delaney and Alan Bennett, I see a great deal of similarity in the way they write and the view that they have. Very northern, very back garden, almost gossipy, and very entertaining.
That's his influence, I suppose.
You get out of it and go back to your fancy man or your husband or whatever you call it.
Oh, I give you such a bloody good hiding. That's what you've gone short of.
Don't shut yourself up for what you are.
You couldn't wait, could you? And now look at the mess you've got yourself into.
Or get out of it without your help.
Threw yourself at the first man you met.
Yes, you're right, I did.
You're man-mad.
I'm like you.
You know what they're calling you round here? A silly little whore.
They all know where I got it from, don't they?
Oh, your bloody head off. Get out of Go ahead!
Stop shouting at each other, will you?
Oh, shut up. We enjoy it.
I can't really seem to write from a point of view that's completely detached from the solid Manchester thing and all those old bonds and all those things that perhaps I never really liked. But it's just something like, it's like your kidneys. They're just there and you have to put up with them.
Because of this constraint, especially living in Manchester where the sex roles are more, you know, clearly defined and, you know, the lads go, you know, whatever, to the pub and, you know, it's so sort of clear-cut here. And if you do anything slightly different, you know, people do notice and do talk. And, you know, so I'm sure Morrissey was well talked about.
Certain violent expressions that people have, sometimes I can really understand them, because sometimes, and certainly when you're like Arthur Seaton from a working-class background, you have to be very overexpressive and you have to be overtly demonstrative in order to get anywhere or to be heard and so on.
Mum called me balmy when I told her I fell off a gasometer for a bet. But I'm not balmy. I'm a fighting pit prop that wants a pint of beer, that's me. But if any knowing bastard says that's me, I'll tell him I'm a dynamite dealer waiting to blow the factory to kingdom come. I'm me and nobody else. Whatever people say I am, that's what I'm not. Because they don't know a bloody thing about me. God knows what I am.
I became very interested in film history. Quite specifically, films from the early 1960s, such as A Taste of Honey, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. Films with a common thread, I would say. The common thread possibly being that quite largely such films are kind of loving the family way. We're about people in the North specifically, with their tail trapped in the door almost, trying to get out, trying to get on, trying to be somebody, trying to be seen. And I found that very appealing. I found it very, well, obviously a great identification with that. Because that's really the way you feel in Manchester.
Shaddy, yaddy, 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 like your life. Oi, shadows!
I hope my singing didn't put you off.
You know, by the time we're burying you, you'll be going off in one of these. Plastic, you know that? Yes, you see, people don't realize. It's all clean lines nowadays. All these frills and fancies are going out. It's all old. Same as I tell Councillor Duxbury, you've got to move with the times. No use living in one style and dying in another, is it?
Quite.
Sit down, make yourself at home.
Oh, thank you.
So you're thinking of leaving us, hey? Is that it?
Frankly, Mr. Shankly, this position I've held, it pays my way and it corrodes my soul. I want to leave. You will not miss me. I want to go down in musical history. Frankly, Mr. Shankly, I'm a sickening wreck. I've got the 21st century breathing down my neck. I must move fast, you understand me. I want to go down in celluloid history, Mr. Shankly.
I grew up in the Old Trafford, Stretford areas of Manchester. I was born in 1959. It was quite hard and obviously very working class. Most of the houses I ever lived in, 4 or 5 houses, are completely demolished, and all the schools I ever went to were completely demolished, almost as if practically, in a way, as if a complete era was completely demolished in the late 1960s. The strong working class communities were completely eradicated, almost. It was almost like almost a political movement to completely squash this very, very strong body of people, it seems. As I began to buy records in 1965, very obvious pop things of the time, which were the most important things in life to me. And it always remained so. All the records I bought, they were friends. These people knew me and I knew them, and they were in my life. Things like Dusty Springfield, Marianne Faithfull, and Cilla Black, and the very obvious big 1960s names, which I still have them all, and I still like them even more now. Sandy Shaw. She seemed to have a particular street sense. She was just really like an ordinary girl and saying whatever really came into her head, although she didn't write the songs. That's how the songs seemed. It seemed like direct conversation.
Message understood. Late Saturday night, you came around and I knew.
On the day that he came, I got into sort of like, oh, you know what it is when you've got kids, you're sort of like your rhythm and your timing, and it all goes out. And when I opened the door to him, I was still in my pyjamas, but I'd put my makeup on. I was horrified. He might think I was this kind of like Joan Collins type character that even went to bed in her makeup. But anyway, as I opened the door, I mean, these two sort of like, well, sort of stupefied faces, and like Morrissey, I thought he was going to faint. And, well, to be quite honest, I've been worshipped from afar a lot, but I've never been worshipped that close up that often, and it sort of took me aback a bit.
Sandy Shore has always meant a great deal, quite largely simply because of the records, which I thought had more life, spirit and energy than practically anything else that appeared throughout the 1960s. And I think that's quite a mean feat, really.
He started reeling off everything I'd ever done, B-sides of songs that had never been released, things I said to somebody that had said to somebody else, and places I'd been that I just suddenly realised this guy knew my life backwards. There was nothing he didn't know about it. He knew all the good bits and all the bad bits, and he still loved me. And it was such a sense of relief that somebody actually knew everything about me and still loved me. It was really wonderful. And from that point, I began to trust him. I didn't trust his music at that point. I just trusted him, and I thought, well, at least it's going to be a giggle. And in love, the good people are left. Yes, we may be hit by rains, but with nothing they'll never have. And in love, the sun shines out of our behinds. Yes, we may be hit by rains, but with nothing they'll never have. And if the people stare, then the people stare. Like when I went for a photo session with him, they'd put me sort of like on a level just above him, so I couldn't actually see what he was doing. And so it was clicking when I was looking at the camera, and all of a sudden I looked down, and he'd got these rosary beads out and was looking up at me like this. These rosary beads. Put them away.
Enseguida regresamos con Leyendas.
I read something about you somewhere. Where was it? And it said that you're more religiously inclined than you think. Something. Somewhere.
So how much does being a Jehovah's Witness actually help you?
Oh, a great deal. It was an effort first off, Morrissey. It was a good 4 years effort. But now it comes easy. I enjoy it.
And you know
I like people,
many other
actually.
people who are Jehovah's Witnesses?
Oh, yeah. It certainly is. There's 3.5 million of us.
I have always admired Viv Nicholson because of her background and the way she fought against her background of total poverty and practical destitution.
I was happy in the haze of a drunken hour, but heaven knows I'm miserable now.
Her whole story of winning the polls and her husband's dying and the disasters that followed and the way the newspaper tabloids haunted her and tried to drag her down and decry her as an individual. But constantly, through the face of this disaster, she had a remarkable resilience and fortitude and humour and a great sense of living, which I think is quite rare.
I've come, when the money's gone down, I've come down, you know. You can only be there if you've got it, so you come down in stages, and that's how I got down to where I am. It's the rock bottom now. But I'm enjoying it. I just feel trapped, you know. And it's nice to say, would you like to come to London to sit with Morrissey in a car, you know? And,
Surely.
It gets me out.
In my life, oh, why do I give valuable time to people who don't care if
I like the fact that when punk came along, that it did demystify the whole process of making records, that people realised that if they knocked over a few phone boxes and sold somebody's motorbike, they could raise enough money to put out a single. But in those days, a lot of bands, having done that, then broke up because they were perfectly happy to do that. They'd achieved something that they'd wanted to achieve. They didn't see it as part of a kind of lifelong career process.
When punk began, I was 16, 17. It meant a great deal to me because within the Manchester area, it was very, very exciting, and it was very big, and it was very important. And there were a lot of key voices within the punk movement who came from Manchester. So therefore, special attention was paid to the area, and it was very thriving, very busy. Here were people practically in one's own backyard who were suddenly known throughout the country, because there you could see possibilities for yourself, if you like.
Personally, I thought all those groups were crap. Because it was at a time when I was getting into crafting songs and writing chord changes and moving things towards middle eights and all those technical building of songs kind of techniques. And none of those groups could do that. I mean, I understand now that it was probably a good thing for music, but at the time it meant nothing to me. The girl groups and Full Spectre was a big influence, the Redbird record label. That was really my main inspiration in trying to play the music that we ended up playing. Get away from particularly duo, synthesizer duo kind of music. Drum machine orientated disco music was quite a big thing even then. And I was delving into the Redbird collection. A lot of Lieber and Stoller stuff, mainly. They were and probably still are my favourite writers. There was one day Joe Moss gave me a video which was really important to us now of a Lieber and Stoller interview. It was, as I said, we were a really big influence. And where one of them, I can't remember which, said he just got to the point where he knew who the other guy was and they hadn't met, and he thought, well, if we're ever going to get together, I'll just go over there and knock on his door and say, you know, let's get together and write songs. Which sounded very, very idealistic, but it caught my imagination, probably because I was, and I'm a idealistic kind of guy, and so that's what I did.
I think Johnny was the instigator, really. You know, he just went round and knocked on Morrissey's door, basically. Then he got Mike in, and he phoned me up.
Learn to love me in the simple ways. Now, today, tomorrow, and always. My only weakness is a listed crime. But last night the plans for a future war was all I saw on Channel 4. Shoplifters of the world, unite and take over. Shoplifters of the world, hand it over, hand it over, hand it over.
The way our relationship worked right from the word off, without getting too soody about it, was that I saw a lot of good things, obviously, in him that I didn't see myself, and vice versa. And he didn't say much, and he just let me tell him what I wanted to do, and just sat and kind of watched me and checked out my shoes and checked out my hair and all those things. And I was taking quite a chance because I was very, very fashion conscious and had a very strong image. I wasn't quite sure about what he was going to look like or what he was into at all, and walked in his house, and he was really taken aback when, hello, and so on. And so he invited me in. First thing I saw was this huge cardboard James Dean crucifix thing. So I thought, well, that's not too bad. I'm on a winner here. And he brought me into his room, and there were all these great pictures of with James Dean and a couple of Elvis pictures and stuff. And immediately it became obvious that we had a hell of a lot in common as regards our feelings towards pop culture and records generally. He gave me a whole series of songs, batches of words, and just to see them on paper, I've literally never seen anything like it. Even as a fan of serious, quote, serious writers, you know, the Dylans and so on, because the first thing I saw was Suffer Little Children.
I did have a fixation on the Moors murders, that I was perhaps a potential victim, if you like, a little bit younger than the victims. It was a very strong subject in Manchester throughout the 1960s, very, very strong, very almost unspoken thing. It was too horrific for people to think about and to discuss.
I was taken aback completely because it was the content was so serious, but at the same time very, very poignant and poetic. And I just looked at them and straight away I worked out the music that these images evoked.
But this is no easy ride for a child cries, oh find me nothing more. We are on a southern misty morn. We may be dead and we may be gone, but we will be right by your side until the day you die. This is no easy ride. We will haunt you when you laugh. Yes, you could say we're a team. You might slip.
Our immediate goal was for there to be a single with a great song on the A side. Whether it had our names on the label as the group was secondary. It was our names being in the brackets, which was much more important. Very into the songwriting ethic.
In spite of strong interest from major record companies, the Smiths signed with the independent label Rough Trade. Morrissey was able to have complete control over their record sleeves, which featured a series of cover stars rather than the group itself. Many people had expected the group to sign with the Manchester label Factory, which had embodied the city's musical image since the late 70s.
It was absolutely crucial that we didn't sign to Factory Records. Without putting down, not giving them, discrediting them for anything that they've done in the past, because they have been very important. But you've got to understand that their time was a few years before mine. I wasn't a punk rocker. It meant nothing to me, I was too young.
I think it's quite typical of newer groups to retaliate and laugh at the previous generation somewhat and do completely the opposite, whatever that may be and whatever it may entail. And within the Smiths, there was certainly a great deal of that, because within the Manchester area, quite obviously, Factory was the establishment.
The Smiths quickly achieved a degree of success that was unprecedented for a band on an independent label. They produced a stream of hit singles and albums, and also became one of the most popular and powerful live acts in the country.
I felt that we had something that was ours exclusively. Image-wise, beads, a certain kind of femininity, and something which was no one else could really grasp, and which was like totally ours, and which belonged not to like just Manchester young people, but to my friends.
I thought it was quite important to come forth and confront people and to look people in the eyes and say quite specific, strong things, instead of poetic, esoteric, veiled things that people had to... people needed streams of notes to understand. It was very important just to say, but with words, of course.
Speed beautiful creature must die. This beautiful creature must die. A death for no reason, and death for no reason is murder. And the flesh you so fancifully fry is not succulent, tasty or kind. It's death for no reason, and death for no reason is murder. And the card that you carve with a smile is murder.
Once it gets into people's living rooms, and it's curious, and it's not instantly definable and instantly not able to instantly categorize it, people get confused and unfriendly.
Once a band that has started out on the programmes that I do, or on the programmes that Kid Jensen and now Janice Long do, starts to achieve some kind of success outside that kind of nighttime Radio 1 area, it's very convenient for DJs and producers who don't like it to say, oh, well, this is a kind of John Peel band, and therefore to not programme the records.
I think the Smiths are possibly the only group who has been continually successful in a chart sense without the aid of daytime radio. And now things do not improve because daytime radio DJs are perfectly aware of the fact that the Smiths exist in a world that's totally separate to theirs. When you move in such a pleasantly smooth and monotonously organised institution, if you like, and if you don't really quite flow with that, you do seem to be, shall we say, a troublemaker. It's like all those old film stars who had their own notions about what they wanted to do. They were box office poison because they really knew how this film should go. And anybody who has any degree of inner control over their own art, well, it's hard really to fit them into the pop world because obviously the pop world, quite sadly, is one of little depth, shall we say.
This summer, at the peak of their success, Johnny Marr left the Smiths. After several weeks of uncertainty, the group officially split up. It was the end of the most original English band of recent years.
I always felt, and I don't, this was a couple of years ago when the four of them were together, that there was a three. And there was Morrissey, and it wasn't a very uncomfortable difference, but there were differences. Johnny is he's not straightforward anything. He's an incredibly sharp, very, very sharp kiddie, as he would probably refer to himself as, and is a great guitar player. I mean, he is one of the last of the guitar heroes, And I mean, he's been asked to do sessions for Keith Richards and Ronnie Wood and all the old hags.
Well, I have to answer just totally personally from Johnny Marr's point of view. Being very selfish, I write for myself. I do write for the group, and we constantly try and impress each other, which is of utmost importance because we value each other's opinions. I don't think there's anyone better, and vice versa. But no, I've always written for myself.
The way I see the whole spectrum of popular music is that it is slowly being laid to rest in every conceivable way. Even if you look at Madonna, I mean, Madonna I don't think could ever happen again, a Madonna figure. It seems like the final female pop icon, if you like. I mean, what could follow Madonna in that sense? So, with the Smiths on another level, I really do think it is true. I think this is really more or less the end of the story. ultimately popular music will end. I mean, that must be obvious to almost anybody. And I think these, you know, the ashes are already about us if we could but notice them.
Stop me if you think that you've heard this one before. Stop me, stop me. Stop me if you think that you've heard this one before. Nothing's changed, I still love you.